It's just me again. Well, again, not just me, but Ibby's still out on his honeymoon. And so, we're going to talk marketing nerd stuff today. Once again, today we spoke with the head of growth from Beehiiv, which is a newsletter and email marketing and website building tool. And I mean, they grew from nothing to 10 million ARR in 2.5 years, and the growth has just continued. And so I can think of nothing better than talking with their head of growth. We talk about a lot of great things, how to communicate with leadership and get support from stakeholders. We talked about SEO for Gen AI and what that looks like a little bit. Talk a little bit about go-to-market. And then we spent a good bit of time talking about testing, about media mix models. They built a really, really great media mix model that has a bunch of capabilities. And they talk about how they're using that to validate brand marketing, how they're using that to figure out what creatives is working best, and then scale and double down on what is working and change what isn't. And then finally, we talk a little bit about web tracking. And we throw a bunch of love out to some of our favorite thought leaders and people that you should be reading, watching, listening to. So I'm going to keep it short there and let us just jump right in and let him speak for himself.
I'm Ibby Syed.
I'm Sean Collins.
And this is Numbers and Narratives.
Okay, we've got EJ White on today. EJ, I think you'll do a better job of describing your background and why you're here than I will. So for those of people who don't know you, what do you do and kind of give us the rundown? What's your background?
Yeah, thanks, Sean. Like you said, EJ White. I'm the head of growth over here at Beehiiv. We're a newsletter-focused email marketing platform. We compete against companies like Substack and MailChimp, but founded out of the experience that Tyler and our founding team had working at Morning Brew. Many people have heard of the Morning Brew newsletter. And we've basically taken and built an email platform that democratizes like the ability to launch these high performance, very engaging newsletters at scale. And so I've been with Beehiiv now for a little more than 3 years. I joined about 3 months after it launched. And been a wild ride from basically like seed through Series B. We've grown, we're like 90 people now. And so I've kind of run the gamut, and it's exciting. I actually got connected with Sean. I was at Google a couple months back and saw you speaking about your experience with Built, and it was really impactful, and just really appreciative to be here now. You kind of reached out on LinkedIn. One thing led to another, and now we're able to have this conversation. So thank you.
Yeah, excited to have him. I think it's pretty cool that we usually call these things like social networks, but I don't know how social people really get versus how much people just use it as kind of a grandstand to just shout. And so it's cool when you can actually have a real connection now. And when I get back to New York, we'll meet up and have a drink or a coffee or something. And it's cool to actually build out the network and meet some great people.
Absolutely.
What made you kind of want to start the growth journey over again?
I come from a background. I've worked in startups and I've worked in agencies. I've kind of jumped back and forth through my career, and it's been very effective in allowing me to really apply and learn what really works. Because in the startup world, there's no hiding. There's no ability to kind of hide behind, it's this fall or this fall. It's like either it works or it doesn't. And I really like that kind of rapid feedback loop really works for the way that my brain works. And so I've gone back and forth between the startup world, joined some agencies, and kind of gone back and forth. I really love the entrepreneurial lifestyle. And so it was actually through an entrepreneurship program at University of Maryland. I first met our CEO, and we lived next door to each other. Weren't particularly close, but we knew each other. And I was in an agency when he posted that he was looking for a growth lead for Beehiiv, and that's how I kind of ended up here. But the point still stands. I've been like no later than employee number 3 at 4 different startups. And maybe one day we'll be a founder. I would love that. I think, although I don't know. I see the way that our executive team, specifically Tyler, how hard he works. And I actually love being able to, have the disconnect between work and life. Not to say I don't work a lot, being the first employee, you basically, the only difference is the cap table for a lot of the time. But now that we're kind of a little bit removed, there is team, there's support. I still see how hard he works every day, and it's, how it consumes his life. So I don't know, maybe founding is in the future for me, but um, it really comes down to the love of just like building and doing. I love this lifestyle, and I love being so early because there's so much greenfield to experience, and so much uh, again, it comes back to that feedback loop. I'm a very like reward driven person, and so, and I also have a bit uh, you know of confidence in myself. And so I've always had that kind of desire to basically prove that like I'm smart enough to do this or do whatever it is, like to tackle a challenge. And so, a lot of smart people go to the consulting companies, and, that's cool for them. But like for me, I've always had that desire to be like, yeah, I can, got the chip on my shoulder. I can do this and make it work and execute and build something from nothing. And so that's like what kind of the drive is. And so the stints in agency worlds has been to really solidify those skills, build those skills, figure out what's working, figure out what big companies are doing and kind of how they're executing. Earlier in my career, it was purely just, I'd been kind of a growth hacker, and I wanted to understand what are the actual tactics that work. How do you do this? Who can I learn from, and basically get from A to B much more quickly? And that was successful. And then, it's kind of been back and forth. So it's a little bit of a kind of back and forth answer as well. But yeah, I mean, that's why I've really enjoyed these experiences. I'm sure, you've worked with very fast growing startups as well. I think there's probably a little bit of, you can probably appreciate some of that, like your work literally translating into the big wins that, the executive team wants to talk about. You're like, I did that. And I love that.
It's thrilling, and it's exciting. And I mean, I'm similarly made the transition. I was at Built and then moved to Coterra. So went from like a Series C, multi-billion-dollar valuation to a seed stage company again, and at the same time launched my own company as doing analytics consulting. Um, there's something really fun about the early stage and kind of the blank page, and like you can do anything. You can do whatever go-to-market strategy you want. You can just go. Whereas later on, it becomes more about optimization and, hey, how do we get 10% more efficient here, as opposed to like, how do I find like a huge new win and just own that? And there's just something, I don't know, it's addicting.
Yeah, no doubt. That's exactly it.
What sort of is your team look like at Beehiiv, and how much are you sort of like a product first kind of growth guy, versus is there channels that you kind of would say you're an expert at, or kind of what's kind of your DNA as a marketer growth guy?
Yeah. So at this point, it still feels like we have a very small team, but I oversee now 12, I think in total. We have a cadre of VAs and offshore talent that we leverage, and a couple freelancers, aside from that. But I oversee a creative team, I oversee a lifecycle team, and I oversee a performance team. And so um, we all work very, very closely together. Everybody's kind of, spider webbed across different things. So obviously creative helps both the lifecycle with our email and in-app notifications, messaging, and copywriting. They also help write the ads and build the ads for the performance team. Our performance team works hand in glove with our lifecycle team to make sure that like the acquisition that's being handed off to the platform and in-app is quality and is leading the outcomes that we want to drive, primarily revenue. We've been like very focused on getting to profitability from like day one. Not to say that we weren't profitable at day one, and we're very close, but we're not yet. But every time we've raised, we've like been very close to profitability, and then we raise and we expand the team and kind of take the swing from there. But the point being, it's like we're not one of those companies that was just like, we're going to raise a bunch of money, we're going to figure out the profitability down the road, but we're just going to invest heavily and just like not really care about that. We've always been very, very focused on the metrics, and so yeah, that's like a big part of what I do. I'm pretty deep in the analytics side. The first agency I worked at I was fortunate enough to have like a full dev team supporting like the people who are doing the marketing strategy and working with clients, and they were instrumental in like teaching and really helping me understand how does event tracking happen on a technical level? How do you deploy event tracking? How do you use, click event listeners to track whatever button you want, And so since then I've taken like different coding courses, and I've really kind of doubled down on like the technical analytics side of things, which is why I found your talk at Google, where you're talking about like, your implementation of marketing mix models built. So fascinating. But my perspective has always been that I don't have to be the most creative marketer in the room as long as I can understand what is driving successful outcomes. I'm smart enough to know like that's what we double down on, and like that can lead us down the right path. Sorry for these Slack notifications.
You're good, man. That's it. It becomes background noise.
So that's like, that has been how I've built my career. The side effect of that is that I've never had a hard time demonstrating and quantifying very hard value. I can go to an executive team, I can go to my boss, I can say my work led to literally like this amount of revenue. I want to raise, or for a client, this work did this much. It's up 200% from last year. It's like very clear. And I've really, I think in the marketing world where traditionally it was a little squishier, kind of before digital marketing, I really love the perspective of just knowing kind of exactly where you stand with everybody at any time and really being that leader in the room. It really changes marketing from kind of that traditional cost center to really profit center. And that's really been my goal, is to be kind of the profit center of any organization that I'm at, because marketing, there's a very straight line between marketing and revenue, and marketing is trusted to really be the tip of the spear to lead the company forward. So, yeah, that's kind of how our team is structured. My specialization, I kind of go deep in the analytics, but at the same time, kind of T-shaped marketers is probably a term that may be familiar to some people, kind of the exact philosophy that I followed. So deep in strategy and analytics, and then dangerous enough to be effective across everywhere else. Paid media, I ran all of our paid media and life cycle for like the first 2 years. I hired like the first people a year ago, 2 years in after our Series B. So I was effective enough to be able to run all of that. We probably should have hired sooner, but I was a bit underwater and would have been able to be a little more strategic if we had hired a little bit sooner. But I was able to run that at a very, efficient, competent level. And we have full funnel SEO operation. We publish once a day, have for the last 36 months. Our goal now is 10 million clicks a year. We're past 1 million clicks a year from organic traffic, and have been really crushing it with the generative AI stuff recently. Turns out that if you just optimize for traditional high quality signals for SEO, the same, algorithms that search from the Gen AI, very similar, heuristics for search and discoverability. So doing that, we have a partner program, affiliate program that we oversee. So we do a little bit of everything, kind of very, very omni market, but those are like the kind of teams and how we're structured and how we've gone to market. And it's worked really, really well so far. It's really great to be surrounded by people who are very talented and very passionate about what we're doing, and that, I can really give my team a whole lot of autonomy to just do and just kind of be there to be the person when they, need a decision point or feedback on something to make it better. It's been really great. And I think that shows through the quality of the product that we've built and the quality of like the marketing material that kind of inundates people within our market.
Yeah. I mean, you have built a really, really cool product. And one of the most impressive things is how frequently you see new features and just updates, and just like how often you guys are shipping things.
Mm-hmm.
How do you, on the growth side, like tie into the product roadmap? And how do you think about, go to market for these new features and these updates? As an email platform, you would assume the default is like, hey, we'll write a blog about this and email everybody. But like, what else kind of goes into your product marketing checklist?
Yeah. So just from taking a step back at the macro level, I love to unpack this because it really is one of the secrets to our success, and in some ways fuels my imposter syndrome perpetually. But one of the kind of more latent growth drivers that we've had is our pace of production and pace of shipping. And that, I like to, especially in marketing context, I like to unpack this because it's something that is not super obvious up front. People say, oh, we'll look at it and say you ship all the time. That creates great like brand awareness or great, feelings from users, but it's a lot deeper than that. When we launched, this was before I joined, but when we launched, we had brought on as like a kind of a round of a couple hundred micro influencers in the business and writing space to be investors in the company. So small dollar checks, but part of that pre-seed round. And so when Tyler and the two co-founders launched the company publicly, it was launching to, first of all, he had his background at Morning Brew, so he had a network and he had a voice that people listened to. He had Big Desk Energy, the playlist that kind of got popular in tech spaces. But when we launched, we had these vested like thought leaders. At the time, it was Twitter. It was much higher quality space to be in, and it basically, was launching to this fertile ground of people who wanted to share, wanted to retweet, and these were trusted voices in publishing and business, and so that in itself, that credibility and that halo effect was really, really impactful to getting that first kind of initial, market push. But deeper than that, we brought on people who were, we came to market with an MVP, a concept of a very clean editing experience, fairly basic, but like, sturdy, robust publishing experience where you could just start writing, hit publish. You have a newsletter that looks really good, great deliverability. And I think our growth feature that we went to market with initially was like the referral program. So many times for referral programs, you have to pay, $29 a month, $99 a month to basically bolt on a referral program. And so that was like the growth, differentiator. And we really targeted people who were those real execution focused operators who you could put them in this product and they wouldn't say, oh, I need like the super granular control over like the frills and like the design and stuff, because they just wanted to write and they wanted to publish and they wanted people to see their stuff. They didn't care about the kind of fluffy stuff on the sides. They just were very execution focused. So in that way, people like Sean Purry of My First Million and started the newsletter Milk Road and others like him kind of came on very, very early. And then publishing for a week or two, and we launch some new features, and so they then see, okay, I've been on the platform for 2 weeks, and now I'm seeing these huge like accretive features being added to the platform. And at the same time, we already had people on the bench who were maybe a little bit, they needed a specific feature in order to move to Beehiiv, in order to use the product. So that's what we would prioritize for when we were building. So 2 weeks in, we would launch that feature, and then they would come off the bench and start publishing. They would like make the announcement that they've moved. The existing users are super happy because they're seeing that pace of progress. And so we're kind of building this momentum. And then 2 weeks later, we add a new feature. We bring more people off the bench. The existing people are like, holy cow, like they're shipping really quickly. The second cohort's like, oh, wow, they just launched a feature, last week, and now they're launching another really valuable feature. The first cohort is becoming even bigger fans because they're like, oh my God, it's been a month and they've already shipped 2 major updates. So they're sharing on social. They're seeing the credibility of Tyler as the leader of our company to be able to ship product and be able to execute on the vision that he'd already sold them on. And all of these different kind of aspects of that kind of engine really propelled us forward. So when I came in about 3 months in, we had to think 1,000 users and 100 paying users. We were doing about $3,600 a month MRR. We already kind of had this wind at our sails. And so when I came in, it was like, okay, how do we capture this very, very early successful momentum? And how do I shepherd it forward, compounding it where I can? And that's really what those early steps were. So it was a lot of organic social media marketing, basically responding and being in every conversation about Beehiiv, not in like a ham-fisted way, but just being there to answer questions, being able there to, give a like if someone had a good experience or something like that. We launched a YouTube channel where we were doing tutorials on how to use the platform. My philosophy with growth is a bit like the interstate commerce clause, where it can just really mean whatever you want it to mean, as long as it ties back to revenue. And so, if it's support, I hopped into support tickets because somebody who's having a bad experience and having a bad day is more likely to churn if we don't get back to them quickly. So that means that's
and then,
kind of
and then
now
they're a negative referral as opposed to, you solved that for them and they glow about you.
Exactly. So like that's a growth activity. Creating YouTube videos for tutorials. If they understand how to use the product, they're more likely to upgrade to use our premium features if they can see them in action or, are having a good experience. So like making videos and tutorials and customer education, that's a growth activity. Obviously the traditional interacting on socials, that's a growth activity. And a lot of the product stuff, being in the product and giving that feedback to the engineering team of like, hey, I've used every product under the sun as a marketer. When I hear that we're launching this feature, this is what I'm expecting it to do because this is what every other platform does. And so when I would get my hands on it, I might say, we haven't built it out to be like robust to that degree, but like literally this is table stakes. Every platform can do this thing. We need to launch with this thing. I'm not being dramatic. Like it just is going to look sloppy or like incomplete if it doesn't do this. Alternatively, there might be things where it's like I go through and just UX test it and just be like, I click this button, I'm expecting something to happen, and it doesn't. And a lot of times, they're, between the PRD and the engineering and the real world use cases, there's like, things that are mistranslated or just misunderstood throughout this process. And so like that product feedback became a big part of like what I did early on in growth. And I think that in a small part helped, again, kind of grease the wheels and just make that experience smoother as we grew.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, I think you guys did an incredible job of founder-led marketing and really putting Tyler out there. I am not. There are a lot of people out there who are like founder worshipers and know every founder of every tech company. Like, I kind of don't normally care. But like I have become a huge Tyler fan just from like the sheer volume of times I've seen his face on my feed, in my inbox. Like, and his perspective is always one that I do generally find myself agreeing with. And if I don't necessarily agree with it, it's just like a slight, this is how I would think about it versus, it's like, I think that you guys have done an incredible job making, using him and leveraging his kind of personality.
Yeah, totally. In that way, he's very much the yin to my yang. I'm like, not to say he's not analytics driven, but like he's very much like the persona that like knows what gets the people going, and which is why he has his Twitter persona, which is why he does the LinkedIn persona. That's all him. Like that's organically, like his social stuff is not me going and being like, yo, Tyler, we need to do this like founder led motion. Like, can you do this? Or me ghostwriting. It is entirely him. He's such a visionary, and he knows, a lot of people I think just like don't necessarily know what they should do. So they look to see, okay, what is this founder doing? What is this marketer doing? I'm going to copy that. And I think one of the hallmarks that's been, certainly my perspective, maybe why Tyler and I work so well together, is like, we both kind of know where we want to go. We're not looking to other people, we might take inspiration design wise or something design inspiration, but like in terms of executing on a plan, we both kind of in our areas know where we want to go and are beating to like our own drum versus trying to say, oh, where do we find growth? Well, this company's doing this. We should copy that, And it really comes through as authenticity and that thought leadership it's so impactful because it's not being generated by AI. It's not being filtered through following some other big tech CEO. It's his actual leadership philosophy, which is unparalleled within any organization I've worked for so far in my career.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's refreshing to hear because I do think that authenticity is what differentiates brands and their ability to really become a brand that you connect with. There's a guy I like a lot. I guess content a lot on LinkedIn, and he posted today about like, what brands are you loyal to? And so I just replied instead of answering the question, like, how would you define loyalty, right? Like, is that like you only buy from them, you give them the benefit of the doubt, you give them the first look? Is it mean you refer people? But regardless, I think that to build a brand that you would be loyal to, it requires a level of authenticity from the leadership and consistency over time, both in what the product means, but also how the brand shows up. And so I do think that that's an underrated value, to just accept that you can be slightly different than everybody else and be authentic to what feels right to you. Maybe, so at some companies, you're going to have a more shy founder or somebody who's not such a visionary or such a great salesperson. And so maybe they aren't publishing all the time, and that's okay. You don't have to be taking this founder-led look at me motion. Maybe you were the guy who is like, has the huge network, has the big reach, loves to be talking about stuff. Like, that's just as fine.
Totally. I think that like that point about authenticity is so, it's one of those things that it's so intangible. It sounds kind of paradoxical to say it's like, it's intangible, because you would say just be genuine. You can tell whether it's binary. It's like somebody's being genuine or they're not. But like it is very hard to, as a marketer, to say, hey, like in order to build this great brand, we need to just be completely authentic, and then to actually do that. It can't really, it's like weird. It's like paradoxical in the way that you can't really decide to do that. It's like, it has to really be in the DNA. And speaking of companies I'm loyal to, there's one in New York. We'll have to go sometime when you're here. It's called Othership. It's like a sauna it's like, okay, they describe themselves as like an emotional wellness social club where it's like, but it's based around sauna and ice bath. And so you go in, you do like a 20-minute guided meditation while you're in the sauna. Their guides are amazing. You do 2 minutes in the ice and then you do another 20-minute sauna, and it's amazing. I've been using uh, their meditation app for like 2 years. And then when I moved to the city, they just opened this location, and it's gotten this cult following here in New York. It's like, it's the hot thing right now because people come and not just so much like you can see an authentic like newsletter company showing up, but like because it's like this emotional level, they've been able to really create a product that connects with people on a spiritual and emotional level, and that is so genuine. And it comes from the founders. I say all this to say, like this, I know I've met the founders. I've met the founding team. There's 5 of them, and they're the most genuine people. The illustration I would use is like, I went to the grand opening and like I'd been using their meditation app for 2 years. And there's this one of the guides, one of the founders is one of like the guided meditation people in the headphones. And so I kind of sheepishly went up to him and I was like, hey, like Harry, uh, I usually know how to handle myself around like people that I've like, admire because like I've been there before. But like, this was really weird. I was like, hey, Harry, like, this is going to sound a little bit weird, but like, I feel like there's like, I know you a little bit because like you've just been in my, like literally I've heard you in my head for like hundreds of hours, like doing the meditations. But like, I just wanted to say hi, you've changed my life. Like, I really appreciate you. And he's like, dude, that's not weird at all. Like, he was just so genuine. He was like, it's so good to know you. I'm so glad you came out to this thing. Like, he was so gracious and just so genuine, and like took that vulnerability and just like made me feel so safe and so rewarded for it. And it just kind of like continued that elevation of like affinity for that brand of like what they're doing in the classes and what I've experienced through the app, async really, is coming directly from kind of the founding group. And it's so refreshing, but it's like one of those things that you couldn't manufacture that. You couldn't build that just by setting out to say, hey, we're going to try to connect with users on this like deep, emotional, authentic level.
Right. Yeah. Like if that was some sort of growth hack of like, I'm going to create a meditation app to speak to them in their subconscious while they're sleeping so that they like us. Like that would be creepy and would be an absolute flop, right? Like it just
Yeah.
like actually worked for this guy.
Yeah.
Okay, so I do want to make sure we talk about media mix models because that was what we've been chatting about on LinkedIn, and you got something pretty cool going on. So can you walk me through, um, what you're doing on the media mix model side, and then kind of how you picked a pretty unique approach to dig into this?
Yeah, 100%. Would love to. So we first kind of started broaching the idea of deploying a media mix model at the beginning of 2024. I come, like I said, from an analytics background. I actually use a script I've used in like 8 different environments, like work and clients, that was developed by the first agency I worked at that emulates the way that Google Analytics UA used to collect and store UTM parameters on a first and last touch basis. And so they wrote it, and it's just a repo on GitHub that anyone can download. But basically, when someone comes to the site, the first time it captures first touch in like 30 different parameters, and it sets all of those parameters also as last touch. And if they convert through a form or something like that, you can store all of those. And of course, it's going to be the same, so you know it was a first time visit. What's really cool is like if they then come back, if maybe they don't convert on the first visit, but they come back through a retargeting ad, that last touch, if it's a separate session, gets updated to that latest thing. And so from an agency perspective, it was really helpful to be able to go to clients and say, with our first party data, we can see that we're driving first touch clicks with this media, with this platform or this tactic. And then we're driving actual like leads, MQLs, whatever we're calling them, through this other one. And we can do, a little bit of different types of modeling that we don't have to rely on Google for because it's de-anonymized at that point because we actually have the first party data. And so deployed that, had that running for a while, about 2 years now, maybe 2.5 years, where we were able to just kind of, we obviously have Google deployed and all the typical tools. So we have the in-platform tools. We had the first party tools where we could then see, okay, where are people coming from? And we ended up also deploying like a user survey to try to figure out, where are people gaining awareness? And so at that point, prior to MMM, we basically had these 3 different things where platform tools, Google Analytics, Facebook, et cetera, were telling us one thing. We're then seeing through first party, which is in some ways the most restrictive, but also can be the most reliable because it's like maybe not the most reliable, but we have full clarity into it because it's de-anonymized, but there's other limitations. And then we had like this customer survey, which is very flawed, but it gives you a great sense into the customer's psyche of like where they actually gained conscious awareness. And so each of those has its own place. If you're, optimizing ads, you obviously want the platform optimizing for what it's seeing as long as those conversions are accurate. You want the first touch stuff because it's like we can tie that to specific customers, and when our sales cycle can be 30, 60, 90 days, it helps do that. And then with the customer awareness stuff, for technical analysis, if someone comes to our site directly, comes through direct none, or even Google search, or even a paid campaign for one of our branded campaigns, all three of these different sources show up as distinct channels in the technical tracking, but can be indicative of basically the same thing, which is top of funnel awareness generation. So if they hear us on a podcast and they like, oh, I want to check this out, they might type in beehiv.com, and that's direct none. They might Google search Beehiiv and then go down the results and hit, that. They may even go to one of our partner sites that has a review of Beehiiv and then click their link, and then it comes through as a referral, and then gets captured by a partner program. Or they'll click at the ad at the top of the search engine, the SERP. So on one hand, we were saying, okay, cool, we have all of this traffic coming through all of these 4 different channels. But then when we look at the customer surveys, it's actually incredibly insightful because it's very different. YouTube went from having almost no attribution to being our biggest channel in terms of where people were saying they heard about us from. But even with that, it's still a little bit squishy because it's customer feedback. And so we wanted to, basically unify these 4 different, data points or kind of data sets, if you will, and basically create one vision of like, okay, we can just listen to this one source. We don't have to triangulate all these different things. We don't have to say, we have these 4 different technical things, but they relate to these, 7 different user areas, and like Facebook's telling us completely something different. That's where MMM comes in and is the promise of a media mix model. And so we got access to Meridian. We got access to their beta program. We found the repo for Robin, which is Facebook's one. We did some research on like which one was better. We decided we were going to do Meridian, and then kind of things just stalled out. We have, one data science person on the team. They're a shared service among everyone. This is obviously not an easy or small task. So invariably, like this big project kept getting pushed because it's like, okay, this is going to take up all the time for like a couple weeks, to do. And so it just kept getting pushed and kept getting pushed. We didn't have the data. So we had some of the data, but we didn't have the media mix model. So like we weren't missing something. Like we didn't know what we were missing. So it just kept getting pushed. And then I saw your talk at Google. It was like Think Lead Gen, I think was the name of like the event or whatever. And you had discussed, and I'd love to hear more in your perspective on this, but you were talking about how one of the big transformative things for your I guess it was maybe growth overall, maybe it was paid media, was implementing an MMM to understand the overall impact of like what you guys were doing on the performance side. And that spoke to me really, really deeply, in that like that's exactly the issue that we were facing. Like, like my Tyler comes to me and says, hey, like we're spending all this money on top of funnel, what is it doing? Like, when are people coming in? How are people being influenced by it? And prior to that, I just had to say, like, trust me, bro, we're going to see this come back. Like, we're going to see it come back, And it was funny when we did our Series B, I was on all these calls with like these partners at VC firms, and, they're like, hey, we saw you increase spend, like you doubled spend in like October, November, December, but we're not seeing that performance, increase hit. And they were very skeptical. And I was like, I mean, that we had scaled the top of funnel campaigns, and it was kind of uncomfortable. I kind of had to stick by my guns. Like, we're going to see that come back. It just takes time. Where you do awareness, and it rises all boats over time. Turns out, 12 months later, all of those cohorts are profitable, and they're just growing, in profitability. But their whole contention was like, are we going to be able to see even ROI? You were spending $50K and you were profitable there. We weren't even spending that much money. We were spending $50K and we doubled it to like $125. They're like, how are you possibly ever going to be profitable on these cohorts? And I'm like, it's going to happen. Like, you just have to look at how these have been progressing over time. Anyway, I was validated. That's the story to say. Anybody listening out there who doubted, I was right, and
You're
we have
all
the data to
wrong.
show it.
Yeah. No,
and
it's
so
tough because you do get in those conversations where it's like, why, if I can see on our last touch analytics that this channel is working, why are you spending money on this one that has a lower ROAS, that has a lower conversion rate, whatever? And it's like, like, how do you think they got to searching Beehiiv on Google? that word didn't just pop in their head being like, I wonder if there's an email platform called Beehiiv. Like someone told them, somewhere they heard it, somewhere you spent money to make them think about it and know it.
Exactly.
And if you're just doing last touch, that never comes out. I love the way you said, like, if you pair it with that survey, okay, now I understand where you think you heard about us. And that helps me understand, like, okay, we're getting this much from Google Ads, we're getting this much direct. We can assume, and if you have that de-anonymized first party version, you can even pair those responses up and say, like, hey, look, these people, we see them as last touch Google Ads. They self-report podcasts. And so we can start saying, if this is consistently a percentage, because you're not going to get 100% survey responses, you're not going to get 100% coverage, but you can start to extrapolate that and say, hey, if we're usually getting 30% of our Google ads heard about us on this podcast, we can assume that of every people who didn't take the survey, it's a similar percentage as well.
Right. No, that's exactly it. And I was validated basically now looking back in the top of funnel awareness, but the challenge still stood. And at the end of the day, if somebody doesn't believe you when you're telling the story, it doesn't necessarily mean that that they're wrong, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you're right. I've found, like, through the agency world and through now reporting to a board, like, it means that you're not being clear in your communication. And so that's one of the things I've really worked on. It's like, it's not a right or wrong thing. It's you're not being able to clearly communicate what you believe to be the case. And so that was like why, identified MMM as a need. We need to be able to go to these stakeholders and show them with some numbers and statistically validated numbers that we're spending in this area and we are seeing an impact. And it's not just customers saying, hey, they heard about us generally through YouTube. We need to be able to show this prospecting campaign, even though we had no clicks from it, or very few clicks from it, obviously we always have some, led to actual down funnel conversions. And so that's the scene that is set. So I this has been kicked down the can. I think this was probably October of last year. I get a DM on LinkedIn from this guy, Peter, who basically is like, hey, working with a team, we're ex-Tesla. We worked in the marketing department, scaling spend before the department got cut by Elon because they don't spend money on marketing. We've built a tool that helps deploy MMMs and interpret the data. Is this of interest to you? And I was like, yeah, definitely. I've been like trying to do this for a while, and I'm not hitting. I'm like, getting a little bit of internal friction, and it's just like kind of wearing on. We need to get this live. So learned more, and essentially what they're doing, this really cool concept, is a company called Blue Alpha. They are incredibly smart guys who basically take the Meridian model, and they will, for your data where you have a minimum data set for a specific DMA. If we're talking about US audiences now. I think you can probably do it abroad as well, but we work specifically US. They will deploy an MMM, like a model, for every DMA which you have a minimum data set, like size. If you don't, they will group DMAs to like Midwest region, Southeast region, whatever. But like they basically group until you have like this minimum data set. So we have a New York one, we have I don't know, maybe even just we have New York State, we have a New York City, we have a Houston, we have a Dallas, we have an LA, etc. We just have Midwest, Southeast, whatever. And so from one level, that's like really helpful because basically they create these models. We can get really granular with where our performance is coming from in these specific markets. We're not particularly geo-based though, so the utility kind of was just nice to have. But what's really exciting is that they then take those models and they roll them up into aggregated models for like the US. So if we do want to just look at US, we can see performance, in the contribution across all these different channels. At the US level, we can also go down to the DMA level at the most granular, and state level for many. We can sort by, we have the granularity to go down to the ad level in some cases. Most of the time it's tactic. We tag all of our campaigns so we can see this is a retargeting, Google retargeting, Facebook remarketing, Facebook prospecting, etc. But that in itself was really, really helpful because that was able to kind of show the picture of like, what is the contribution from all of these channels? And, obviously then how does it do it? They're great in that we also are able to deploy models. We have the same setup with this kind of, this modeling that doesn't just look at purchases, but we also have it sign up level. So we can look and see, this is the contribution of all these channels to just signups, and then this is the contribution of our paid spend based on actual purchases. And typically there's a mismatch in some places between both of those. They take things like a couple steps further though. So just having the data and being able to see those percentages of how much each channel contributed leaves, there's a little bit more to do, because then you have to do the interpretation of like, what do I do with that data? And what's so special about Blue Alpha is that they then take the data and they do a lot of that for you. So within each of these campaigns or tactics, or however you're breaking out your campaigns, they will look at the effect, like the magnitude of the effect of the channel. So driving more conversions means higher effect, driving fewer means fewer. And then they look at the proportion of effect to spend. And so spend effect, can be big. If you're spending a lot, it's going to be high. And if you're spending a little, it's going to be low. And by comparing the two, they can tell you where your impact effect is outstripping your spend effect, which means you should increase your budget. And to the opposite side, they can show us where we're overspending, where we could pull back our budget to be more efficient, to kind of find that efficient frontier, basically. And so that's incredibly helpful to like be able to, at a glance, be able to do that on basically a daily basis. We can adjust budgets in near real time for that effect. And they even have like a tool where it shows us like optimal budget curves. So kind of like Google, when you go into Google Ads, and it shows you, hey, if you spent $30 a day instead of $10 a day, you'd be here on the chart. They have those curves for each channel broken down to the DMA level. If we wanted to do geo-targeting down to the, state or US level, which is, typically how we do it. But the last thing that's really cool, and toss it back
There's
to you.
no
I've
need.
been
This is
talking for a while.
fascinating. This is great.
The last thing they do is then they help do, their platform does experiment design. So this is like the last part. So not only can we tell where the budgets are, should be spent the most, when we launch new campaigns, because they have these models by DMA, they have a very tight view of like similarity and correlation between different geos. And ultimately in growth, like the ultimate performance experiment is like the holdout test. Run campaign in one area, don't run a campaign in the other area, see if there's lift, between the two, keeping all else the same. And then you'll be able to assess that. And so their platform does allow us to do that. So if we have a new concept we want to launch, we basically will ask them, hey, like over the last month or whatever, which geos should we target for this test? What's the size of the budget for what we want to drive, for the channel, for the tactic? And it basically tells us, okay, cool. If you're running this new retargeting campaign, you're going to need 2 weeks and you're going to need $4,000, and you should run it in New York, and the control will be Dallas. And so when we go into Google Ads, we can set that up. We can set up the campaign. We can geo-target it to New York or New York City or whatever. We run it for 2 weeks. And then their team basically will pull the report and gives us these wonderful, beautiful charts of like the before and after, and like the lift versus like the expected performance in the two geos, and will give us a statistically validated, output. And then if it works, then we can say, okay, cool, we can confidently take this, and instead of spending, $40,000 or $400,000, to just blitz this and to test it, we can spend a relatively small amount of money, but then be confident that when we roll this out more broadly, it will perform well. One of the coolest things that I've been a part of here that some people don't fully understand, I think, we ran an out-of-home campaign in the New York subways over the March to April to announce like this push to introduce our entry into the web builder. We have a website builder, entry into the web builder space. And so very expensive. I think it was like, several $100,000 to run this campaign. And of course, big spend. We've never done out of home before. It was more kind of like a brand play, big swing. We get all these texts from people being like, oh, I saw your ad. But we wanted to know whether it actually had an impact. And we asked the team, hey, can you run run the numbers and look at New York between this period of time? And sure enough, they were able to find a statistically validated lift in both sign up and purchase conversion based on that campaign. Now, the efficiency was very, very low because it's such a broad, huge campaign. But the fact that we were able to generate a statistically valid proof of lift from that campaign for this company was like unheard of. They were like, nobody has ever been able to do that before and show us. Like everybody has anecdotal stuff of like everybody, all these people said they heard about us on the subway, but no one is able to come back and show us that it did work. It drove an increase in actual performance. And so brand formance is the hot word these days, and it's like, just another way that we can really dive into that. But really, really bullish on Blue Alpha. Shout out to Peter Graff. You guys, if you're listening to this, should check them out. I don't know. Should I disclose? I am an investor in their seed round. So after I would use them as a client, I was such a happy client that I begged them to join their raise. They just had a massively oversubscribed seed round. From some of the biggest names. I don't know if they've announced it fully yet, but that will be coming soon. It's not a secret.
Well, the news story just broke here.
Yeah, it's not a secret. It's not.
Look out, world,
for sure. It's been closed for a bit. So, but yeah, check them out. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions or want to hear more. But it's been really cool working with them, and just to be able to see that data, like be able to go down and dig deep. And now it's basically becomes a question of like we're working at such a sophisticated level that now the communication becomes a little bit more difficult, because most people that we're talking to don't necessarily know how to, they don't know how to interpret some of this stuff. So, a lot of folks, they want to see our experiment level data. They want to see, okay. And the big challenge was like our sales cycle. We have a 30-day trial, and then many people upgrade 45, 90 days later. And so when you get to that level of like delay, the granularity of like this specific ad creative drove this purchase doesn't exist. It's just like, we technically could have some of that granularity, but it just would be an effort and futility to be like, we ran this test 3 months ago. This creative won the test and specifically drove a 5% or, drove these like 10 extra sign or purchases like 3 months later. And so one of the big challenges we have is, or had until more recently, was basically, external folks want to see, we ran this test, it drove success, and like end of the day, that's it. And what they're kind of not primed to be able to, like the paradigm they're not primed for is like, okay, we ran this test and it showed success in terms of like signups spiked right away. And so we saw that was validated and we scaled it. And we're kind of using the MMM as like a checksum at the end of the day. We can scale conversions really, really quickly through this like short time frame. And then we're confirming that these are quality, through the MMM. And so just kind of setting expectations has been one of the challenges, to just educate people on like what statistical analysis means and what, these probabilistic modeling versus deterministic modeling is really like kind of the key. It's like most people are still thinking through things around deterministic modeling paradigms. But, we've seen really, really huge gains in efficiency by like basically trusting what we're seeing with the data. Because at the end of the day, it does require, I think, a little bit of trust. You have to trust that like statistics is a real thing and that your data, like the data is real, which it is. But like when you do trust it, you're kind of stepping on a little bit of a limb until you see the results. And then it's just been really, really great.
And that is super cool. It sounds like a very, very powerful tool and a very powerful weapon that allows you to skip, you talked about communication kind of being the key for convincing the board, convincing stakeholders of that, like, hey, you can trust me. Like I have this covered, and having to get better at telling that story. I've been in that boat so many times where you have to start to kind of come up with like little shortcuts to be like, hey, look, like we increased free signups and conversion rate to paid has not dropped. Therefore, like I shouldn't even have to build you a model. Like if we're still getting 40% conversion from free to paid, even when I double acquisition for free, obviously that means, it's converting to paid at the same rate and like we're fine. But you do start to, it's nice to have more data. I think there's a level of comfort for people who aren't marketers who just in like a nice graph. And it goes a long way to be like, hey, look, like he's not, like, I do trust EJ. He has done nothing but be successful here. However, if I could see a graph, that would make me so much happier. And to have that is incredible.
It's like you're in the room with us.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it is. It's that's the constant struggle.
I love the ability to do, localized testing and figure out those statistically comparable places, because without these DMA or state or region based media mix models, you're basically having to go off of census data and say like, hey, Houston is similar in, you know, gender breakdown, age breakdown, median income, and, you know, family, you know, how many kids people have. And so we think it's a comparable market to this market. And so we'll use those. But then you can take that one step farther now and say, like, not only are these the 10 cities that are most like this one city, but we also know that these are this is the 2 that react most comparably to our marketing and to our messaging. And so it gives you even that stronger bit of confidence that your holdout tests and your geo tests are going to be relevant across the board. That's super cool.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, that's like kind of the, we'll have to come up with some new ways to test and experiment that, are just like fourth dimension, fifth dimension ways to test. Cause like, once you can do this really, really easily, and that's the magic. It's like, it's lowering the bar to get this, like these incredible insights. There's obviously A/B testing. You take a campaign, through Google's tools and you're A/B testing just everyone. And then, the geo test is like, through our VCs, I was mentored by the former CMO of HIMS, the founding CMO of HIMS. And she was telling me, this was also led to the MMM, like in the conversation was kind of part of the light bulb moment. She was telling me, okay, well, it's like, sounds like you're doing a lot right on the analytics side. What really was transformative for us, and they were D2C e-com, obviously have to be super high performance, was this holdout testing. And like, it just sounded at the time, this was maybe a year ago, sounded incredibly intimidating on how to like actually set these things up and like run a test that like had enough budget to be able to do this. And like, what would you even do? Like, do you run out of home? Do you run a radio ad? Do you run physical spots and this sort of thing? Obviously, I know you can like run, your search ads or whatever in a specific DMA, but at the same time, it doesn't feel like that it would be that, easy to collect that signal. It's like, do you just run search ads for best newsletter platform and you're only targeting one place and not targeting another? Do you run display ads? Do you run YouTube ads? It's like, you're going to reach a certain sort of person. But like when you're and if you're just doing that with kind of dumb tools, like it doesn't really feel like it's worthwhile, or like doesn't necessarily feel like it's something that's achievable. And so this has been really, really helpful, in time to take, up leveling that. So now, we got to figure out ways that we can, go from holdout test to like the next level. And maybe there is a next level. I'll have to, maybe meet some CMOs, or like, I remember we were doing holdout tests. Now we're doing this other type of test that's even higher brow. But if you have any of those insights, let me know. We want to be ever elevating the game.
Do you know who Avinash Kaushik is?
I feel like I definitely have seen the name. With more context,
he was at Google for like, I don't know, 10 or 15, maybe, I don't know, forever. He was always at Google, and he was on the analytics team. He has a blog called Occam's Razor.
Okay.
And it's all about marketing measurement and analytics. And it is fascinating. He spends most of his time really focused on the hard to measure things: brand, creative. How do you like predict outcomes and get from a point of like looking back and saying this test won, to being able to say like this test will win, and here's the impact it will drive. And how do you communicate? He does a lot about dashboards and reports, and how do you effectively communicate to the non-analytical, to the non-marketers, to the C-suite. I'll shoot you a link to his blog. It's his newsletter and blog. I've been reading it every week for years. It's like, it literally is the homepage to Chrome for me. When I open up a new Chrome window, it goes to his blog. But he's got some really cool stuff, and he's actually at a creative testing company now. He left Google. And their whole thing is like, how do you pre-test creative in this modern era?
That's amazing. Yeah. Precognition, pre-testing. That sounds like exactly what I, the next level I need to get to.
I hadn't planned on dropping that one here. And then that was the only thing I thought of.
So it turns out I'm already following Avinash. I don't know. On LinkedIn, at least. I don't know. I'll connect with him. We'll send him a connection note. Looks like I need to get his book too. I just picked up the book Product Analytics. It's like a textbook on product analytics. And, just do some light reading, but it looks like I need to pick up another book and follow him. The other ones I followed historically, kind of my ones are, just give some shout outs here. That always helps. Maybe they'll reshare the podcast if people hear their names, Simo Ahava, is like goated in terms of like maybe more on the technical side, but if you're a developer who, is interested in analytics, or you have a developer who's implementing your analytics, like Simo Ahava is one of the literally greatest of all time in terms of being able to explain these complicated topics and providing resources and so forth, and so forth. And the other one that I share a lot more on the marketing analytics. I'm sure you've heard of this guy as well. It's the Optimize Smart blog. Optimize Smart is the name of the blog, and it's Himanshu Sharma.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Really, really great, very deep archive of like tactical things. It's like, I want to do this analytics or tracking thing in Google Tag Manager, or I'm having this problem in Google Analytics. How do I, fix it and solve it? Much more marketing focused, whereas Simo Ahava is more developer focused, but both of them together are both like kind of hand in hand, form a really, really strong foundation for kind of the technical capabilities around marketing analytics specifically, not so much like the statistical stuff, but love those folks. I'm trying to get Simo Ahava he's got a blog, newsletter. I really would love him to come over to Beehiiv as a dream, but maybe work on both of them, because Optimize Smart's not on Beehiiv either.
Maybe we just set up some sort of automation. We subscribe to his newsletter. AI copies it, pastes it into Beehiiv, and you build your own Beehiiv newsletter and audience for him. And then you just come to him with like 10,000 subscribers. And you're like, hey man, we built you a new list. Here you go.
That's a great strategy. My current one is basically just signing up and just like every time I get a newsletter, replying. This was great. It should be on Beehiiv.
Be better on Beehiiv.
Be better on Beehiiv.
Dude, that's great. I mean, I love it when it's like Avinash. I have replied to some of his newsletters, just throwing a Hail Mary, and he has responded to me and been like, so I've gotten like very clear feedback on. I have questions about what you said here. I'm thinking about doing it this way, and he'll be like, here's why. Yeah, he says it nicer than this, but here's why you're dumb, which is helpful for me because I need things explained that simply to me.
Yeah, that's one of the biggest challenges for me, honestly, has been like finding those people who are qualified and who have the knowledge to basically call my bullshit and basically be like, no, you're dumb, like do it this other way. I found that is one of the biggest challenges. That's why I was connecting with like the CMO of him. So I reached out to our VCs and was like, hey, like I need some mentorship, and it's just like very hard to find someone who's like this deep in growth and like analytics and the types of things where you can like actually up level. There's so many people sharing tips that are great for people who are early career, mid career, but that's really, really great to hear, because that's like, I mean, part of why I reached out to you. It's like you see like-minded people, and as a growth-minded person, I'm always trying to like be the dumbest person in the room so I can absorb
100%.
that, whatever they've got going on.
Yeah, that's been a struggle, I think, for marketers for a very long time. Is you basic level marketing, basic level skills. Yeah, no problem. There's infinite blogs and infinite videos and podcasts and courses and resources. But once you get beyond like moderately experienced, it is hard to find things that have like the nuance and ability to say like, well, in this type of situation, here's what I'd be thinking about. Whereas in this type of situation, here's why,
That's the exact struggle I come up with when when everyone says I should like do more content creation and like do more thought leadership. It's like, it's a total personal problem, but I feel like I have too much context that every time I go to write something, I'm thinking of all of the different caveats and like the situations where like what I'm saying isn't true, and then it completely paralyzes me. And I'm like, all right, fuck this. Like I'm an idiot. I'm just gonna let this go, and then I see next week the most simple marketing concept get 10,000 impressions and likes, and it's just like, man, this guy's a marketing genius. I was like, oh wait, I could have just written that. That seems like the most simple thing, but like it's obvious to me, but it's not necessarily obvious to everyone. That's the difference. That's why I'm not a content creator.
There was this great line I heard. The strategist behind Mr. Beast and a few other people. I listened to an interview with him. Yeah, he's like 20. He was like 25. I don't know. He's a young kid, and he had made a video called like, what I learned, basically saying like how successful he is and how he like, knows the roadmap and how to make $1 bazillion by age 25 or whatever. And someone like commented and was like, you're so, smug. Do you think you'll answer? He's like, no. But if I titled it anything else, you aren't going to watch. Like if I said, here's what worked for me, try something similar, but you might have to do it a little bit differently, you wouldn't watch that video. And so it's tough when like you are humble, you want to be honest, you want to say like, hey, I did this. I'm not saying that if you run this ad, you will see conversion rate increase, but I have to make kind of audacious claims and remove all nuance from this, or else it's going to be a 10-page essay and no one's going to fucking click or read or care.
Yeah. That's really good context because and it actually gives me a lot more grace for like the very self-promotional, like guru styled, thought leaders on LinkedIn, just because like there's so many people, I won't name names because I don't have particularly positive associations, but like I see people, who build these great followings. I'm like, yeah, I read their book and it was the most basic. I learned this in the first 6 months of my job, at my first marketing job. This isn't any, but like, they're like, oh my God, this guy's a genius, and I'm like, what they're genius at is, one, being able to package and teach, which is a skill in itself, and they're great at self-promotion. And I have no doubt they have skills around growth. And, but it's just like, it's a very specific skill to be able to like, taking the learning and teaching part about writing a book, but like in terms of being able to take these ideas and package them in a way that is salient for people and to be able to self-promote is an incredible skill. And it's one that I haven't worked on. I don't want to say I don't have it. I don't have it, but like I haven't worked on it. I haven't, you know, built that craft. And every time I start thinking about it, I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to focus on building Beehiiv to be the decacorn that we know it can be, rather than like trying to, build this other score. And then sometimes I'm like, wait, maybe I could help us grow quicker if I did have this bigger following. So it's always this constant tension. But that is a really good point, and something to keep in mind, I guess, for my own journey, to basically be like, don't worry about the nuance. You can always hash out the nuance in the comments, when there's always the person who's going to call you out and be like, you're an idiot. Like, you can't, this doesn't work in this
Yeah.
situation. And you're like, yeah, I know.
Yeah.
To your point, exactly what you're saying.
I love what you said though about the people, I also have been pretty critical of people, but I had this great line. I met this guy named Blair Enns who teaches like sales cycles for agencies. And so when I was agency side, we brought him in to do like a workshop with us. And we were just chatting one time and he's like, man, you ever notice that there's a lot of books that would be great blog posts? And I was like, yeah, you're right. Like, people are just pumping out the books when it probably could be a lot simpler.
Yeah, I mean I used to read, as a hobby in a way, I used to read all these business books, and then I realized, like, when I started working with Beehiiv and like we actually started building a huge, like, great, potentially huge business, I realized like immediately, like, my desire to read all of these books completely just dropped off a cliff, because I realized that so many of these people, they talk about what works for them. And again, I don't know if this is a case of like the lack of like nuance. It's more just like a lack of recognition of survivorship bias. And I found that so many times you could read a book and, even some of the ones that are very popular, but it doesn't mean like anything. Usually there's something you can apply, but it doesn't mean most of what you can apply to the situation you're in. So at best it's misleading, or at worst it's misleading. And at best it's just, kind of just a data point that you might consider and find a little bit of value in. There are some obviously books that I recommend to everyone, because it comes down to first principles. Is this person writing about like first principles that can be applied to a kind of mental model of worldviews, or are they saying like, I did this specific strategy? Because usually if it's like a strategy book, it's not going to work. If it's a first principles, like, this is how the world works, this is how people work, or this is how marketing works or growth works, it's going to be very useful. But if it's like, I did this and this is how you can do it too, usually completely worthless.
Yeah, I think you're right there. Well, EJ, man, I think it's probably time we wrap up. This has been enormously fun. I really, really appreciate you coming on. For everyone who listened and had as much fun as we did, or maybe just a little bit less fun since they weren't in the conversation, how can they find you? How can they be a part of the conversation with you?
Absolutely. I'm on X, EJ_Beehiiv. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm under Edward White on LinkedIn, just because I was an idiot and like verified my ID with Microsoft, because I have no worry about tax encroachment on my, personal life, I guess. So now they won't let me change it to EJ, because it's like, you've been verified. Your ID says Edward. So anyway, it's Edward White on LinkedIn. I'm in a tuxedo, black and white, easy to tell. I think there's actually like one or two other Edward Whites. I won't follow you back on Instagram, so don't even try. It's like more personal life. That's where I'm at. If you want to reach out to me, specifically ej@beehiiv.com, love to hear from people over email. If you want to discuss newsletters, if you want to discuss marketing growth, analytics, always happy to discuss. And Sean, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. We met digitally before we joined this. And so a little bit of a risk to, meet with somebody who you don't know personally, per se. And so I really appreciate your willingness to go out on a limb. I think this went really well. I really enjoyed my time, and I can't wait to get together for coffee. I'll take you to Othership perhaps, and we can sweat it out if that's something you're into. I don't know if that's
Yeah,
at
that
all
sounds
something
great.
that
That sounds great.
you enjoy in your free time, but either way, I'm very excited to get together when you're in New York, and I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you and have this conversation.
Yeah, man, it was great. We will talk soon.
Absolutely. All right.